Investigates mysterious deaths of 3 children in Enugu State. Federal government intervenes in Imo River's boundary dispute. In international news, Americans observe Thanksgiving today on a much smaller scale as a result of COVID-19. And in sport, Argentine football legend Diego Maradona dies at 60.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Enugu State Police Command has begun a full-scale investigation into what it calls the mysterious deaths of 3 children at Ichi in Igbo Eze, south of Enugu State. Police Commissioner Ahmed Abdurrahman says the command will apprehend and bring to book perpetrators of the act. Abdurrahman also urged parents and guardians to be vigilant and take good care of their children and wards, especially in these ember months. The commissioner said 3 of the children were found dead in a parked car in Echi community and that 2 other children were still alive when police got to the scene. They are now receiving medical care at a hospital. The police commissioner said the case has now been transferred to the state CID. Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, has advised the leadership of the All Progressives Congress APC to respect its zoning formula in picking a presidential candidate for the 2023 elections. Fashola says this is the core of the agreement by APC founding fathers before the 2015 elections. The minister said although zoning is not in the party's constitution, party leaders had agreed on the zoning when the party was being formed. Fashola has also advised party members to support the Malabuni-led caretaker extraordinary convention committee, which he described as a product of necessity. He says the caretaker committee must be respected because it is a byproduct of the leadership crisis that engulfed the party. The federal government has shown interest in settling the boundary disputes between Imo and River State. In its attempts to resolve the dispute, a federal government team represented by members of the National Boundary Commission and officers from the Office of the Surveyor General of the Federation has flagged off the Imo River's interstate boundary physical and training demarcation. The federal government also inaugurated members of Imo State Committee on the boundary demarcation with a joint task team consisting of officials from the 2 states to ensure a fair and just exercise. Imo State Deputy Governor and Chairman of the State's Boundary Committee, Professor Placid Njoku, assured the National Boundary Commission of the state's government partnership and support to ensure a smooth boundary exercise. He expressed optimism that the Commission would end the lingering boundary disagreement by meticulously carrying out the exercise. Nigeria recorded 198 new COVID-19 cases from 13 states on Wednesday, bringing the total number of confirmed infections across the country to 66,805. While the Nigeria Center for Disease Control says 3 out of every 5 deaths from the virus in Nigeria are among persons older than 50 years, that toll remains at 1,169. The Federal Capital Territory garnered the highest number of infections with 53 cases. Lagos was second with 48. Ogun chopped 40. Such a high number has not been recorded in the state in a while. Akwa Ibom reported 20 cases. NCC reports almost 750,000 of Nigeria's 200 million population have been tested so far as more patients recover daily from the virus. Official data have shown that Nigeria has slipped into a recession after its gross domestic product contracted for the 2nd consecutive quarter. Nigeria normally accounts for an average output of 2 million barrels per day, but the effect of the pandemic and low oil prices have cut production to approximately 1.5 million barrels. Correspondent Deji Badmas has the story.
It was always known that Nigeria's economy was going to contract in the third quarter and slip into recession after a second quarter contraction. What was difficult to tell was by how much the economy was going to contract. The Nigeria Bureau of Statistics has now put the third quarter contraction at 3.62%. Second quarter contraction was 6.10%.
The oil sector was largely responsible for the slowdown in the economic activity in this third quarter, as it recorded a very sharp contraction of minus 13.89%, the largest decline in this quarter in the past 14 quarters. The slowdown in global economic growth and oil demand consequent upon COVID-19 pandemic, as well as our obligations to meet OPEC cuts, were principally responsible for the slowdown in the oil and gas sector.
For the better part of this year, Nigeria's economy had literally been on a lockdown as authorities struggled to contain the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. The collapse in the price of oil globally worsened matters for the country, which heavily relies on revenue from crude sales to drive its economy. And then there was the hashtag #EndSARS protest, which happened just as the country was emerging from the COVID-19 induced lockdown. All of this combined with other factors to throw the country into its present recession.
These are difficult times, and that the government had to take some very difficult decisions. There are some reforms that had been taken that could not be taken for years. And while we recognize that things are very difficult, let us encourage the people that are working on these reforms so that they can have the strength to continue.
The government is optimistic the recession will be short-lived. Minister of Finance Zainab Ahmed says the country will exit the recession by the fourth quarter or at worst the first quarter of 2021. But with labor unions in the country poised for a general strike over the increase in petrol price, that could derail the anticipated recovery.
Our expectations of a quick exit, which will be historically fast, is anchored on the several complementary fiscal, real sector and monetary interventions that have been proactively introduced by government to forestall a far worse decline of the economy and alleviate the negative consequences of the pandemic.
Well, if you have another strike or protest on account of labor strike, it's going to be a major setback for all the recovery efforts or prospects for the Nigerian economy. We have not fully recovered from the shock and the devastation of the #EndSARS protest. A lot of investors are still counting their losses. The economy is yet to be restored to normalcy and all of that.
But most importantly, Nigeria will be hoping that the global economy gathers steam as soon as possible, especially with the recent announcements around COVID-19 vaccines. If the global economy continues to slow down as we're seeing at the moment, then it's inevitable that Nigeria's recovery would be delayed.
Coming up, African stories. Concerns rise in Ghana that imported second-hand clothes could transmit COVID-19. And later, international news. Americans observe Thanksgiving today on a much smaller scale as a result of COVID-19.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. East and Southern Africa are the world's most HIV-affected regions and home to the largest number of those living with HIV. Uganda has its fair share of that population, but the country has also been highly rated globally for its efforts at fighting the scourge. Dorcas Kimono reports.
The UNAIDS statistics of 2019 estimate that Uganda has about 1.4 million people living with HIV, with over 53,000 annual new infections. In the same year, close to 21,000 Ugandans are said to have succumbed to AIDS-related illnesses. Uganda AIDS Commission has for long intended to reduce annual new infections to at least 18,000. But as Dr. Nelson Musoba, the Executive Director of Uganda AIDS Commission, explains, these efforts continue to be frustrated by the high prevalence rate among men of ages 45 to 49 years, a regime that is known for actively engaging in transactional sex with young women.
So you have men aged 45 to 49 with 14%, and the men in that age group tend to be, they call them mobile men with money. And they are the ones engaging in transactional sex with the young women in the lower age group. So you can see that is how you're having the HIV transmission at a very high rate.
The fight further hit a snag when COVID-19 set in. Most AIDS-related treatment and services were halted. Dr. Musoba says this mainly affected the adherence to treatment among the people living with HIV. As the country gears up for this year's annual AIDS Day commemorations on 1st December, the Minister for Presidency, Esther Mbayo, has underscored the need for concerted efforts for desired results.
As we draw towards the festive season, there tends to be a lot of excitement within the community, and people tend to engage in a lot of risk sexual behavior. I take this opportunity to remind the country that we should not relax our efforts and commitment towards preventing and ending HIV/AIDS.
This year's annual celebrations will run under the theme National Solidarity and Shared Responsibility towards Ending AIDS.
Concerns are rising in Ghana over the importation of second-hand clothes, which many, including authorities, say could harbor the coronavirus. Although the World Health Organization has said the virus cannot be transmitted through clothing items, Ghana authorities believe otherwise. Correspondent Nabil Ahmed Rafai reports.
This is Ghana's biggest and busiest second-hand clothing market, Kantamanto, in Accra. With over 30,000 stands, shoppers can get everything from used men's underwear to designer clothes. The trade in hand-me-downs provides jobs for hundreds of people here. Janet Eduful and many traders say they have suffered huge losses due to the coronavirus pandemic.
COVID-19 has really affected our business. Our customers have been complaining that the virus could be in the clothes, so they don't buy. But we try to explain to them that when the goods are exported, they take up to 3 months to reach Ghana, by which time the clothes would have been free of the virus.
The World Health Organization says the coronavirus is unlikely to spread through clothes, but the Ghana Standards Authority, which is responsible for maintaining product and service standards, thinks otherwise.
When these goods come in, they are touched by the dealers. They spread them, even assuming they are fumigated, the COVID-19 is not there. They spread them, they deal with them, so somebody who has a disease and touches them can have it. And once you have it and people go to buy, they will also be contaminated. So it is possible that second-hand clothes can be a source of COVID-19.
This isn't the first time concerns have been raised about the potential health hazards of using second-hand clothing. In 2011, the government planned to enforce the ban on second-hand clothing, arguing that it was unhygienic, but backed down after facing stiff opposition from traders. This time, the government stood its ground, and in March, it started enforcing a law banning the import of hand-me-downs for the first time since the legislation was passed 26 years ago. Braziers, panties, and handkerchiefs have all been blacklisted, but other products continued to flood the market after lockdown restrictions were eased in April.
Most of them come through the ports. So we have officers stationed at the port 24 hours 7. They are always there and they inspect. When they inspect and they come across them, they seize them. Unless it is hidden in such a way that we can't find them. But once we find them, we seize them. Sometimes the trick is that they mix them with other products, other imported items.
For those who buy the used clothing, it's a case of what they can afford.
I buy second-hand clothes because they are cheap. They say the clothes are fumigated before they get to Ghana, so I hope I don't get infected with COVID-19 when I use the clothes.
The Ghana Standards Authority, however, says it's uncertain if the used clothing is free of the virus after being fumigated and shipped to the country. But banning the import of second-hand clothing in its entirety could lead to loss of jobs and push many traders into poverty.
When we return, international news. Americans observe Thanksgiving today on a much smaller scale as a result of COVID-19. And later, sport. Argentine football legend Diego Maradona dies at 60.
You are watching ANN.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow this story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Thousands of Peruvians are volunteering for the Phase 3 clinical trial of the Chinese COVID-19 vaccine. China says its support for the effort in Peru shows a high degree of trust between the two countries. Correspondent Dan Collins reports from Lima.
China is testing a potential vaccine in one of the world's hotspots for the coronavirus, Peru. The Asian giant's oldest and largest pharmaceutical firm, Sinopharm, wants to lead the way in the global effort. The vaccine is also being tested in Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco and Argentina. Volunteers are lining up at the Peruvian capital's main medical university, Cayetano Heredia.
Peru is betting on a vaccine as its best hope in the fight against COVID-19. Volunteers here are taking part in the country's first clinical trial for a vaccine developed by the Chinese pharmaceutical giant Sinopharm. Scientists here say the vaccine could be ready as early as the beginning of next year.
Peruvian actor Jason Day is maybe not your typical volunteer, but he felt compelled to sign up when the trials began a few months ago.
This virus has shown our weaknesses as a nation, both at a state level, what our government is capable and incapable of doing, but also us as a society.
Even before getting the potential vaccine, he had to undergo tests, starting with a blood sample, and then a molecular test to make sure he was not already infected with COVID-19.
I'm very impressed with how professional, impeccable the whole thing is. I feel safe. I feel like I'm in good hands. I'm trusting it. I trust scientists in general. I see how hard they work, and these people, they're trying to save us.
Day has been warned there could be side effects like fever or nausea, but he's now become one of thousands of Peruvians approved for the vaccine. Sinopharm expects to test 12,000 participants by the end of the year.
So they've injected whatever it was, we don't really know. We got 2 different vaccines that they're testing. or the placebo, right? Now I have to wait for about 20 minutes, and as soon as it goes off, I have to take my temperature, and then wait for another 10. That's it. A little bit of patience.
How are you feeling?
Feeling great. Useful.
Peru welcomed the opportunity to volunteer for clinical trials, not just with Sinopharm, but also with other pharmaceutical firms. But Sinopharm was the first in a tight race to enter the clinical trial stage, says Principal Investigator Dr. Germán Málaga.
We are convinced that Peru's participation in this study has several advantages. The first is that we're showing that we can do a study of this magnitude with 12,000 participants. It's the biggest study that's been done in Peru and the biggest in Latin America. Secondly, it will be a high-quality study. Thirdly, it will put Peru in an advantageous position, if the vaccine is successful, to negotiate the acquisition of this vaccine.
Peru has one of the world's highest COVID-19 mortality rates, making it fertile ground for vaccine trials. The government hopes, with the help of China, there soon will be promising results.
Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says his country plans to vaccinate a large part of its population of 47 million against the coronavirus by the middle of next year. If there are no delays in EU vaccine supply, that is expected to reach the country by next month. He says such a move would make Spain the first country within the EU, along with Germany, to have a full vaccination plan. Correspondent Rahul Pathak reports.
An ambitious vaccination plan to deal with the greatest health crisis in this country's modern history. If the vaccines currently in development are approved, the programme will begin in January. The Spanish government will hope to cover a substantial part of the population within the first 6 months of next year. Vaccination won't be compulsory and it will be free of charge.
I think it's too soon. They should test it a bit more because we don't really know if there are any side effects. I think it is good to have a vaccination campaign, but it needs to be more assessed.
En este momento ya por los efectos secundarios. Al principio de la pandemia.
Right now, everyone is more worried about the side effects of the vaccine. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were all scared because it was a new virus. Nobody had knowledge about it. So we've been doing what authorities said, locked home, and that's it. Now we're worried about the side effects the vaccine might have.
Now, the government has set aside over €1 billion for its vaccination programme. In terms of the drugs themselves, we know that 3 are currently in development. Spanish officials say they hope to buy the first 20 million vaccine doses from the American company Pfizer early next year. And they also say they hope to buy 31.6 million vaccine doses from the British firm AstraZeneca once their drug is ready. And this is the key. This is all dependent on actually having a vaccine. So far, the news from all 3 in development is hugely positive, but the clock is very much ticking.
Today is Thanksgiving Day in the United States, a day when millions of families get together, share turkey meals, and revel. And it is a day of the famous Macy Parade, but it's a small occasion this year as COVID-19 has put a damper on large celebrations. The turkey industry in the country is seeing both a shortage of smaller turkeys and a surplus of the bigger ones as more Americans plan to hold smaller gatherings for Thanksgiving as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. As Americans heed the advice of health authorities to hold smaller gatherings, they have had to downsize their turkeys from the usual 30-pound birds. A recent survey conducted by the American Turkey and Poultry Company, Butterball, found that 3 out of 4 of its respondents are opting for simpler, smaller dinners this year, which is in line with recommendations from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. But that creates a problem for America's turkey industry, where at least 40 million turkeys are usually consumed every Thanksgiving. The National Turkey Federation says most of the frozen turkeys one would find in the supermarkets now had gone into the field before the pandemic hit. Now there is a huge backlog, especially of the big-sized birds that people are not buying because of the reduction in crowd sizes. Nonetheless, Americans say they will make the best of this Thanksgiving Day and pray that next year will be coronavirus free. Then life can return to normal. Up next, sport. Argentine football legend Diego Maradona dies at 60. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News in sport. The football world is mourning the death of football legend Diego Maradona. Argentina's President Alberto Fernandez has declared 3 days of official mourning of Maradona, who died of a heart attack on Wednesday at the age of 60. The Gimnasio coach was hospitalized early in November after complaining of low spirits and fatigue. Maradona began his professional career with Argentina's Junior at the age of 16. Mayor of Naples has started a formal process to rename the San Paulo Stadium for Diego Maradona. The city operates the stadium where Maradona led Napoli to their only 2 Serie A titles in 1987 and 1990. And Cristiano Ronaldo has equaled Lionel Messi's record for the most home goals scored in UEFA Champions League history. With this, the Portuguese extended his overall goals record in the competition to 132. 70 of his goals have now been scored in home matches, which have now seen him level with longtime rival Lionel Messi for the most home goals in the competition's history. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.